You notice things other people don't. A shift in someone's tone before they've said anything wrong. A tension in a room that no one else seems to feel. You've always assumed that was just you, just how you're wired. But it wasn't random. There's a specific reason some people read situations faster, feel things more deeply, and carry a kind of awareness that most people simply don't have access to. And for most of them, it didn't come from books. It didn't come from training. It came from surviving something. Psychologists call it traumatic intelligence. And what's striking is not just what it is, it's how quietly it develops. How the very experiences that felt like damage were, at the same time, building something in you that is genuinely rare. Most people who have it don't know they have it. These are 7 signs that you do. The first sign is one most people never think to question. You walk into a room and something in you shifts. Not dramatically, quietly. A kind of alertness that switches on before you've even looked around properly. You notice the person sitting slightly apart from the group. The smile that doesn't quite reach the eyes. The way 2 people are talking, but not really listening to each other. Nobody told you to look for these things. You just do. Most people would call that perceptiveness. Some would call it empathy. But there's something more specific happening. Something that started much earlier than most people realize. And for reasons that had nothing to do with personality. You were trained to scan. Not by choice, by circumstance. The second sign lives in the body before the mind catches up. There's a particular kind of knowing that arrives before you've consciously registered anything. A dinner where nothing has gone wrong yet. The food is on the table. The conversation is ordinary, but something has shifted in the air. A slight edge in someone's voice. A pause that lasted half a second too long. And you felt it, quietly, without reacting. You adjusted your own tone. You chose your next words more carefully than anyone at that table knew. Nobody else noticed. That part you're used to. What you're less used to is understanding why. Why your nervous system picks up signals that other people walk right past. Why you're already preparing for something that hasn't happened yet. That awareness has kept you safe more times than you can count. It has also made it very hard to simply be present. The third sign is quieter than the first 2, but in some ways, it runs deeper. People assume good communicators are good with words, but some of the most precise readers of human behavior are listening to something else entirely. The pause before someone answers. The way a person's energy changes when a certain topic enters the room. What gets left out of a story? What someone volunteers too quickly, as if offering it before you can ask. You learned this language early, not from books, from necessity, when the emotional environment around you was unpredictable, when moods shifted without warning, when what was said rarely matched what was meant. You adapted. You stopped relying on words alone. You started reading the architecture underneath them. That's not intuition. That's pattern recognition built under pressure. The fourth sign is the one nobody talks about. It is tiring. Consistently, quietly, invisibly tiring. Every social situation carries a kind of background processing that most people don't run. You're reading the room. You're tracking how people are feeling. You're adjusting, anticipating, managing the emotional atmosphere, sometimes without anyone asking you to. Because at some point, that management felt like your responsibility. You go home from gatherings that looked fine from the outside and feel emptied. Someone asks if you had a good time, and you say yes, because explaining the real answer would take longer than it's worth. The truth is, you were working the entire time. You just weren't working on anything anyone could see. This is one of the quieter costs of traumatic intelligence. The sharpness is real. So is the weight of it. And here is what's worth pausing on, because this is where most people misread themselves entirely. The signs you've heard so far, the scanning, the sensing, the fluency with what people don't say, the exhaustion underneath it all. These are not flaws dressed up as strengths. They are not coping mechanisms that accidentally became useful. They are genuine cognitive and emotional adaptations, real ones, measurable ones. The remaining signs go deeper, because traumatic intelligence doesn't just shape how you read the world, It shapes how you move through it and who you become inside it. The fifth sign is the one that gets misread most often. People sometimes read it as coldness or distance or difficulty, but that's not what it is. Your threshold for trust is simply higher than average, and for a reason that makes complete sense once you understand where it came from. Your brain learned early that warmth and safety are not always the same thing, that someone can seem kind and still be unreliable, that the signals people give off don't always match what's underneath. So you built filters, careful ones. What looks like reluctance is actually precision. You're not withholding trust arbitrarily. You're waiting for something consistent, something that holds up over time, under pressure, without an audience. When you do extend trust, fully, without reservation, it means something different than it does for most people. It means you saw clearly, and you chose anyway. The sixth sign lives inside the mind, and it rarely gets quiet. Your mind doesn't stay in the present moment easily. It moves forward. It runs scenarios. It asks what happens if this goes wrong, what the exit looks like, what you would do if the thing you're hoping for doesn't happen. Other people call this overthinking, anxiety, catastrophizing. But that framing misses something important. A nervous system that grew up inside unpredictability learns to stay ahead of it. Anticipation was a form of protection. If you could see the problem coming, you could prepare. If you could prepare, you had some control over what happened next. The pattern that once kept you safe now runs in environments that are mostly fine. You know this sometimes. You can see yourself doing it, preparing for conversations that will probably go well, mapping exits from situations that aren't dangerous. The logic is intact. The setting has just changed. The seventh sign is the one that quietly defines how you've built your entire life. There's a self-sufficiency in you that other people notice before you do. When something breaks, you fix it. When there's no one to ask, you figure it out. When the support that should have been there wasn't, and this happened enough times that it became a pattern, you stopped waiting for it. Not bitterly, just practically. Dependence started to feel like a risk you couldn't afford. So competence became the default. What's interesting is how invisible this is from the inside. You don't experience it as strength. You experience it as just handling things. That's what you do. That's what you've always done. But that's not a personality trait. That's an adaptation. There's a difference. The person who learned to rely on themselves because it was genuinely the only option carries something different from someone who simply prefers independence. You know which one you are. 7 signs, 7 patterns. Each one distinct, and yet when you look at them together, they aren't really separate things at all. The scanning, the early sensing, the fluency with what people leave unsaid, the exhaustion underneath it, the slow and deliberate trust, the mind that stays 3 steps ahead, the self-reliance that was never really a choice. They are one thing. They are the architecture of a mind that had to grow quickly, and did. Psychologists who study post-traumatic growth have found something worth sitting with, that adversity doesn't only damage. In very specific, measurable ways, it also builds. The perceptiveness you carry wasn't random. The empathy wasn't accidental. The depth of your thinking about people, why they do, what they really mean, that didn't come from nowhere. It came from somewhere. And it cost something. Both things are true. The sharpness is real. So is the origin of it. What you do with that understanding, that part is still open.